The storm hit San Diego without warning, flooding the streets and sending everyone running for shelter. Everyone except the homeless man under the bridge and the 3 Navy SEALs who found him there, calmly organizing debris into defensive positions like he was setting up a forward operating base. That's when they realized this wasn't just another vagrant, this was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Welcome to Hidden Heroes. Before we begin this incredible story of recognition and redemption, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. These are the heroes hiding in plain sight. December in San Diego was supposed to be mild, predictable. But nature had other plans. The storm system that roared in from the Pacific brought with it something the city hadn't seen in decades. A deluge that turned streets into rivers and sent even the hardiest souls scrambling for cover. Under the Interstate 5 overpass, where the concrete met the canyon, Robert "Ghost" Martinez had made his home for the past 8 months. Most people called the area Tent City, though Ghost preferred to think of it as temporary. He'd been saying that for 8 months now. At 62, Ghost had the kind of weathered face that came from too many years in the sun and too many nights in the cold. His hair was gray, pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. His clothes were layered, practical, the kind of setup that spoke of experience living rough. But there was something different about Ghost, something the other homeless residents couldn't quite place. He didn't shuffle when he walked. His eyes never stopped moving, always scanning, always aware. And when the younger guys got too rowdy or the drug dealers came around, Ghost had a way of making problems disappear without ever raising his voice. The rain started at 3 in the afternoon, just a drizzle that sent the smart folks indoors. By 4, it was coming down steady. By 5, the storm drains were backing up and the camp under the bridge was starting to flood. "We need to move higher," shouted Maria, a woman in her 40s who'd been living under the bridge longer than most. "The water's coming up fast." Panic rippled through the small community. 23 people, all with nowhere else to go, watching their few possessions float away in the rising water. Everyone was running around, grabbing what they could, shouting over the sound of rain and thunder. Everyone except Ghost. He stood in the center of the chaos, calm as a statue, his eyes tracking the water flow, the wind patterns, the structural weak points of their makeshift shelters. Then he moved. "Maria, take the kids and the elderly to the north pillar," he called out, his voice cutting through the noise with unmistakable authority. "Higher ground, protected from the wind. Danny, grab those tarps and secure them to the fence line. Create a windbreak. Everyone else, leave the heavy stuff. Take food, medicine, documents only. Move now." There was something in his tone, something that made people stop panicking and start following orders. Not because he was loud or aggressive, but because he spoke like someone who'd done this before, someone who knew what worked when everything was falling apart. Within 10 minutes, Ghost had organized the evacuation of an entire homeless camp with the efficiency of a military operation. He'd identified the safest positions, established supply lines, and created defensive barriers against the storm. That's when the 3 Navy SEALs arrived. Petty Officer First Class Marcus Webb, Petty Officer Second Class Tyler, Tank Rodriguez, and Seaman Jake Morrison were driving back to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado when they got the call. "All available personnel. We've got flooding in the downtown corridor. Citizens need assistance at multiple locations." Webb took the Interstate 5 exit toward the homeless camp, not because it was on their official route, but because he'd grown up in these neighborhoods. He knew people lived under these bridges, and he knew they'd be in trouble. The 3 SEALs pulled up in Webb's pickup truck just as the worst of the storm was hitting. Rain hammered the windshield like bullets, and the wind was strong enough to rock the vehicle. "Jesus," Tank muttered, peering through the windshield. Who the hell would be out in this? That's when they saw him. Through the sheets of rain, a figure moved with purpose between the concrete pillars, not running, not panicking, just moving with deliberate precision from position to position, checking on people, adjusting shelters, coordinating what looked like a tactical response to a natural disaster. "That's not normal," Morrison said quietly. Webb was already grabbing his rain gear. "Come on, let's see what's happening." The three SEALs climbed out into the storm and immediately understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. The homeless camp hadn't just survived the flash flood. It had been systematically reorganized into a defensive position that would have impressed their instructors at Coronado. Higher ground had been secured, supply lines established, vulnerable personnel protected, and in the center of it all, directing operations with quiet authority, was a man who moved like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Webb approached carefully, hands visible, the way you approach someone you don't want to startle. "Sir," he called out over the storm, "we're Navy, here to help." The man turned, and Webb felt something click in his chest. The eyes that met his weren't the eyes of a broken man or a victim of circumstance. They were sharp, calculating, alert, combat eyes. "Appreciate the offer," the man said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "But we're handling it. Could use some extra hands moving the disabled folks to higher ground, if you're willing." Webb blinked. In 2 sentences, this homeless man had sized up the situation, assessed their capabilities, and given them a mission assignment. Just like, "Roger that," Webb heard himself say, falling automatically into military response mode. "What do you need?" For the next hour, the 4 men worked together like a trained unit. Ghost, as the others called him, directed operations with the kind of tactical awareness that couldn't be faked. He knew how to move people efficiently, how to prioritize resources, how to anticipate problems before they became crises. Tank found himself taking orders from a homeless man, and somehow it felt completely natural. "Sir, if you don't mind me asking," Tank said during a brief lull, "where'd you learn to do this?" Ghost was checking on an elderly woman's breathing, his fingers finding her pulse with medical precision. "Long time ago," he said without looking up. "Different war." Morrison had been watching Ghost's movement patterns, the way he cleared corners, the way he positioned himself with his back to solid cover, the way he seemed to have 360 awareness of everything happening around him. "What unit?" Morrison asked quietly. Ghost's hands stilled for just a moment, then he resumed checking the woman's vitals. "Unit that doesn't exist anymore," he said finally. The 3 SEALs exchanged glances. They all recognized the tone, the deflection, the careful non-answer that wasn't really a denial. As the storm began to ease, Ghost had everyone accounted for, fed, and as dry as possible under the circumstances. No one was injured. No one was missing. A potential disaster had been turned into a textbook emergency response. "Sir," Webb said as they prepared to leave, "this was impressive, really impressive." Ghost shrugged. "Just doing what needed doing." Webb hesitated, then decided to take a chance. "If you ever need anything at all, here's my number." He handed Ghost a card. "Day or night?" Ghost took the card, studied it for a moment, then looked back at Webb with something that might have been a smile. "Appreciate it, petty officer. But I've been taking care of myself for a while now." As the 3 SEALs drove away, Tank was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "That guy's military. More than military," Morrison added. "Did you see how he moved? How he organized that whole operation?" Webb was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the way Ghost had handled the emergency, the precision, the leadership, the tactical awareness. "I think," Webb said slowly, "we just met someone we should probably know more about." The next morning, Webb couldn't stop thinking about the man under the bridge. Something about the whole encounter felt unfinished, like a puzzle with missing pieces. During his lunch break, he drove back to the Interstate 5 overpass. The storm had passed, leaving behind clear skies and the smell of wet concrete. The homeless camp was back to its normal routine. People sitting in the sun, drying out their belongings, going about the business of survival. Ghost was sitting apart from the others, back against a concrete pillar, reading a battered paperback book. Up close, in daylight, Webb could see details he'd missed the night before. The man was in good shape, too good for someone living on the streets. His posture was military straight even when sitting casually, and there was something about his hands, calloused in specific places, scarred in ways that spoke of weapons training. "Mind if I sit?" Webb asked. Ghost looked up from his book, studied Webb for a moment, then gestured to a spot on the concrete. "Free country," he said. Webb sat down, trying to figure out how to start the conversation. How do you ask someone if they're a ghost from the special operations community? "Hell of a thing last night," Webb began. Storms happen, Ghost replied, not looking up from his book. Not everyone handles them like that. Ghost turned to Page. Experience helps. Webb tried a different approach. I've been in the Navy 8 years, SEAL Team 5. Never seen civilian emergency response that smooth. That got Ghost's attention. He closed the book, marked his place with a piece of cardboard, and looked directly at Webb. SEAL Team 5, he repeated. Coronado? Yes, sir. Ghost nodded slowly. Good team. Good reputation. There was something in the way he said it. He knew Team 5 personally. He'd worked with them before. What about you? Webb asked. You serve? Ghost was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, controlled. Long time ago, different Navy. How different? Another pause. Then Ghost seemed to make a decision. 1980 to 2008, started as a radio man, ended up doing other things. 28 years. Webb did the math quickly. That put Ghost's service starting during the Cold War, running through Desert Storm, probably Afghanistan and Iraq. Other things? Ghost's smile was thin. Things that don't show up in personnel records. Webb felt his pulse quicken. That was SOF talk. Special Operations Forces. The kind of missions that happened off the books, in places that didn't officially exist. What kind of other things? Ghost studied Webb for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. You ever hear of SEAL Team 6? He asked finally. Webb's breath caught. SEAL Team 6, officially known as DEVGRU, the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the most elite counterterrorism unit in the world, the team that killed bin Laden. Yes, sir. How about before it was Team 6, when it was just a different kind of team? Webb shook his head. The history of DEVGRU. Before it became famous wasn't exactly common knowledge. Ghost leaned back against the concrete pillar, his eyes distant. 1982 to 2004, he said quietly. Back when we didn't have names, just call signs. Back when missions got burned, records got shredded, and operators learned to disappear. The words hit Webb like a physical blow. This homeless man, this guy living under a bridge, was claiming to be a founding member of the most elite military unit in American history. What was your call sign? Webb asked, barely breathing. Ghost was quiet for so long that Webb thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, so softly Webb almost missed it. Ghost. That evening, Webb sat in his apartment, staring at his laptop screen. He'd spent 4 hours searching military databases, historical records, anything he could access with his security clearance. The problem was, most DEVGRU records from the 1980s and 90s were still classified. What little information existed was heavily redacted, full of black bars where names and details should have been. But Webb was persistent, and he had connections. He called Tank and Morrison, filled them in on his conversation with Ghost, and asked them to help dig. 3 SEALs with different security clearances and different databases could cover more ground than one. It took 2 days, but they found it. A single reference in a declassified after-action report from a hostage rescue mission in 1987. No names, but a mention of an operator with the call sign Ghost who had successfully infiltrated a terrorist compound and provided reconnaissance that saved the lives of 12 American hostages. Then, another reference, this one from 1991. Ghost had been part of a team that neutralized a chemical weapons facility during the Gulf War. High-value target eliminated, no American casualties. A third reference from 1999, classified mission in the Balkans. Ghost had spent 6 months undercover, providing intelligence that prevented an ethnic cleansing operation. The pattern was clear. For over 20 years, someone with the call sign Ghost had been conducting missions at the highest levels of special operations, missions that required someone who could blend in, disappear, become invisible. The kind of operator who could, if necessary, vanish completely. Webb printed out everything he could find, then drove back to the bridge. Ghost was in the same spot, reading the same battered book, but when he saw Webb approaching with a manila folder in his hand, his expression changed. Figured you might come back, Ghost said. Webb sat down, opened the folder, and spread out the documents. Robert Martinez, he said. Age 62, born in East L.A., enlisted in the Navy in 1980 as a radio man, Transferred to Bud S in 1982. Graduated with Class 127. Ghost glanced at the papers but didn't seem surprised. Then you disappear, Webb continued. No duty assignments, no promotion records, no permanent duty stations, just nothing. For 24 years. A lot of people disappear in the Navy, Ghost said mildly. Not like this. This is Special Operations disappear. This is Black Ops disappear. Webb pulled out the mission reports. Chemical weapons facility in Iraq, hostage rescue in Lebanon, counterterrorism in Bosnia, always the same call sign, always the same MO. Ghost gets in, does the impossible, gets out, for over 20 years. Ghost was quiet, staring out at the traffic passing overhead. Until 2004, Webb said. Then Ghost disappears for real. No more mission reports, no more references, nothing. Some missions don't end clean, Ghost said finally. What happened? Ghost was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant, like he was remembering something painful. Fallujah, November 2004. Team was compromised. 4 good men died because someone talked. Investigation found the leak, but the damage was done. He paused, his hands tightening slightly on the book. They offered me a desk job, Pentagon posting, full pension. All I had to do was pretend those 4 men died for something that mattered. Webb waited. I walked away instead. Some things you can't just file paperwork and move on from. So you've been living like this for 20 years? Ghost shrugged. Living like what? Free? No one giving me orders? No one sending me to kill people I've never met? Seems like an upgrade to me. Webb looked around at the homeless camp. The concrete and dirt and smell of unwashed bodies. This is an upgrade. For the first time, Ghost smiled genuinely. Son, you've never had to live with the weight of what I've done. This, he gestured at the camp. This is light as a feather compared to that. Word spread quickly through the SEAL community. Not officially, but the way news always travels in tight-knit units. Whispered conversations in the chow hall, text messages between teammates, phone calls to older operators who might remember the stories. Within a week, Webb's commanding officer called him into his office. Commander Sarah Mitchell was a 20-year veteran who'd worked her way up through the ranks. She was tough, fair, and had a reputation for taking care of her people. Petty Officer Webb, she said, gesturing to a chair. I understand you've been doing some research. Webb's stomach tightened. Ma'am? Robert Martinez, call sign Ghost. Ring any bells? Webb nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. Mitchell leaned back in her chair. I made some calls. Spoke to some people who remember those days. You want to know what they told me? Yes, ma'am. They told me Ghost was the best operator they ever worked with, completely reliable, absolutely fearless, and had a gift for getting into places no one else could reach. She paused. They also told me he disappeared 20 years ago after a mission went bad, and that if he's still alive, he's probably the last person in the world who'd want to be found. Webb felt his hopes sinking. Ma'am, I think he needs help. From what I hear, Robert Martinez has never needed help from anyone. The question is, does he want it? That afternoon, Webb drove back to the bridge one more time. But instead of going alone, he brought Tank and Morrison. And instead of just talking, they brought something else. A manila envelope. Ghost saw them coming and closed his book. He looked tired, older somehow, like the conversations of the past week had drained something out of him. Figured you'd be back, he said. Webb sat down and handed him the envelope. What's this? Job offer, Webb said simply. Ghost opened the envelope, scanned the contents, then looked up with something that might have been amusement. Instructor position at Coronado? SEER training specialist, Webb said. Survival, evasion, resistance, escape. Teaching young SEALs how to stay alive when everything goes wrong. Ghost set the papers aside. They know who I am? They know enough. 28 years of service, exemplary record, skills that can't be replaced. They know why I left? Webb nodded. They know you walked away for the right reasons, and they know the Navy needs people who understand what the right reasons are. Ghost was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers. Why? He asked finally. Because you saved 4 lives the other night, Morrison said. Because you've probably saved hundreds of lives over the years. And because maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself for the ones you couldn't save. Tank leaned forward. Sir, with respect, living under a bridge isn't honoring those 4 men. Teaching the next generation how to come home alive, that's honoring them. Ghost looked at each of the 3 SEALs, then back at the papers in his lap. I haven't been Robert Martinez in 20 years, he said quietly. I don't know if I remember how. Then don't be Robert Martinez, Webb said. Be Ghost. Be the guy who gets impossible missions done. Just do it for us this time. 6 months later, Webb was running morning PT with his unit when he saw a familiar figure standing near the Coronado training compound, clean-shaven, wearing instructor utilities, looking like he'd never been anywhere else. Ghost, now officially Senior Chief Petty Officer Robert Martinez, instructor, was briefing a group of SEAL candidates on wilderness survival techniques. The key to staying alive, Webb heard him say as he jogged past, isn't being the strongest or the fastest. It's being the most adaptable, the one who can find opportunity in disaster, who can turn chaos into advantage. The candidates were hanging on every word. They could sense, even if they couldn't articulate it, that they were learning from someone who'd been tested in ways they couldn't imagine. After PT, Webb stopped by the training area. Ghost was cleaning up his equipment, preparing for the next class. How's it going? Webb asked. Ghost looked up, and for the first time since Webb had known him, he looked genuinely at peace. You know what the best part is? Ghost said. What's that? For the first time in 20 years. I'm not disappearing. I'm helping other people come back. He gestured toward the training compound, where young SEALs were learning the skills that might someday save their lives. Those 4 men who died in Fallujah, they can't come home. But maybe, if I do this right, some other mother's sons will. Webb smiled. Think you'll stick around this time? Ghost shouldered his gear bag, looked out at the Pacific Ocean beyond the base, then back at Webb. I've been a ghost for 20 years, he said. Maybe it's time to try being human again. As Webb watched him walk toward the instructor building, he thought about the homeless man under the bridge who'd organized a disaster response with military precision, who'd carried 20 years of guilt and pain, but had never stopped protecting people. Some heroes wear uniforms and get medals and have their names engraved on monuments. Others live under bridges, go unnoticed, and save lives in the shadows. And sometimes, if they're lucky, they get a chance to come home, not to the place they left, but to the purpose they never abandoned. Ghost had spent 2 decades punishing himself for failing to save 4 men. Now he was spending his days making sure no one else had to carry that weight. It wasn't redemption, exactly. The dead were still dead, and the guilt would never completely disappear. But it was something better than redemption. It was service. The kind of service that doesn't ask for recognition, doesn't need parades, doesn't require monuments. The kind that simply asks, how can I help the next person make it home? Welcome to Hidden Heroes. If this story moved you, please share it, subscribe to our channel, and remember, the greatest heroes are often the ones we walk past every day, carrying their battles in silence, protecting us in ways we'll never know. You just have to know how to look.